The computer's acting slow. Okay, welcome to the other side of medicine. I'm Dr. Christosky. You can call me Dr. J. And tonight we are excited about having a special guest here on the podcast. And we're going to be talking about orthomolecular medicine. If you haven't heard about what that is, well, you'll find out here shortly. But orthomolecular medicine is really the forerunner of functional medicine, natural medicine, all the alternative medicine was really founded on the foundation of orthomolecular medicine. And we are really honored to have a guest tonight that learned about orthomolecular medicine from his father, who was one of the pioneers of this really unbelievably beneficial form of medicine that uses nutrients like vitamins and minerals and trace minerals and diet and lifestyle, and also using phytochemicals, coming plant compounds to help the body to restore itself, to basically help the body to have biochemical balance through proper diet, lifestyle, and nutrition, and specifically larger doses of nutrients that are not typically used. And they really have a profound effect on helping to able to balance the biochemical, the chemistry of the body. And the term orthomolecular medicine was coined by a very famous scientist, Dr. Linus Pauling, who was the only person that I'm aware of that was a two-time Nobel Prize laureate. He got 2 Nobel Prizes. I don't think there was anybody else, and I'll stand to be corrected on that. Maybe our guest will help.
He should have had 3.
Okay. Well, anyways, that's Greg, our guest, and we'll go ahead and invite him into this conversation here in just a minute. But the idea of orthomolecular medicine is that chronic disease stems from nutritional deficiencies, imbalances in the body chemistry, and orthomolecular medicine is based on using these nutrients compared to and versus what we call toxic molecular medicine, which is using medications for everything under the sun. Medications, all of them, have toxicity in them. Now, look, sometimes medications are necessary. Nobody's going to argue that. Sometimes, especially in emergencies, they're really beneficial. But to use a pill for every ill is insanity. And so we don't want to have one nation under medication. So here on the other side of medicine, we really try to promote things like orthomolecular medicine, nutritional intervention, lifestyle intervention. All these things are really the way to get to the root cause of illness as opposed to treating symptoms. And that's what medicine primarily does. And there are very powerful forces in this country that make sure that they have control over the medical community and have had for a long time. And orthomolecular medicine pioneers like Dr. Richard Kunin, who our guest, that was his father, he was one of the leading pioneers in orthomolecular medicine, and he had to fight his way along with his peers, tooth and nail, against these powers, these powerful forces. And he paved the way as a medical doctor, getting ostracized and having to go through a lot of trials and tribulations, but triumphed, and always was proven to be not guilty, and was always proven to be in the right, even though they kept on going after him. His own medical profession went after him, and he paved the way along with Dr. Linus Pauling, who coined the term orthomolecular medicine. And they were friends. Dr. Kunin and Dr. Linus Pauling were friends, along with Dr. Abram and a lot of the other pioneers. And so right now I want to, without further ado, bring on our guest who rode on the coattails of his father and learned about nutrition from a very young age, and rode on, as I said, the coattails of his father, and learned nutrition by proxy. By being around his father, his dad had a clinic in their home. They had a very large home, and they had a 2,500 or 3,000 square foot facility for nutrition in the basement of their home. And they were pioneers in this field and treated people from all around the world. And Dr. Kunin was the founder of some very prestigious orthomolecular medicine communities. And he pioneered so many things and wrote books and was just a really stellar leader in this field. And Greg, his son, who we have here today and we're privileged to have, he really followed his dad's footsteps in trying to continue his dad's legacy. His dad died in 2021, and we are so grateful for his dad. And now we're grateful for Greg and all that he's doing. He is the president of Loa Nutritionals, and they have wonderful products. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight, but we really want to get into discussing about the benefits of orthomolecular nutrition and diet and lifestyle modifications to help to treat chronic disease. Greg himself went through a lot of trials and tribulations physically, emotionally, mentally, because of toxic elements that accumulated in his body, specifically lead and other pesticides. And he'll talk about his story in just a minute, but he was able to triumph by using his dad nutritional intervention. So let's, without further ado, welcome Greg Kunin to the Other Side of Medicine. Welcome, Greg.
That's great to be here with you.
Good. So tell us a little bit about your story, if you would, about how you at a very young age went through some real difficult physical problems because of the toxic elements in the environment, as well as other complications.
Well, it's interesting. I was very fortunate that I got into this out of necessity. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, just as I was really starting to get into school and reading and all that, I was having some pretty serious issues. I was riding a school bus for an hour and a half every day in the 1960s, and I was very high lead. And fortunately for me, my dad had already started to move into this arena in 1967. He asked a very simple question, and he just wanted to know, is it possible that my patient is malnourished? And believe it or not, that seems like such a simple thing today, but that was considered heresy from the medical perspective in 1967. And lo and behold, he started doing laboratory analysis of all of his patients, and it was clear.
Oh, by the way, if I may interrupt you,
yeah, of course.
1967 is the exact year that Linus Pauling actually founded the term orthomolecular medicine.
Well, my dad was very moved by that and was very entrenched in the whole arena of Stanford. My dad's original training, he's a board certified psychiatrist. He was at Cornell, New York Hospital. He came out to do his postdoctoral fellowship at Stanford in 1960. So he was kind of around that whole arena and the education world. Was involved in radical psychiatry and hypnosis. And towards the end of the 60s, around 67, is when he had his big epiphany. And he did what any sensible scientist would do. He didn't presume anything. He went and got the blood, sent it off to the lab, and lo and behold, his patients turned out to be malnourished. And so he did the first 10 or so patients, and it was quite exciting to see. And then he did the first 100, and then by the time he got to 1,000 patients, and it was 100%. Who would have thunk that sick patients could possibly be malnourished, especially those who were being treated? And at that time, my dad was doing a great deal of psychiatry work, and so it really changed his whole view of medicine. after a short period of time, he realized he was having so much better results working with niacin, and he was involved. We can get into it. He was involved in the early days of niacin and discovering of the prostaglandin impact of niacin, and he was having such incredible results. Patients who would go off of these antipsychotic medications, they were like different people. And so, fortunately for me, in 1968, my dad made another big leap forward, and he just wanted to know, is it possible that my patient is toxic as well? So it was very fortuitous for me because, like I say, we discovered I was one of the first victims to get my hair cut and have that sample sent into the lab. And sure enough, I was loaded
Well, you know
with
what?
lead.
You're lucky you did it back then, because if you tried now, you wouldn't have any luck. No
Well,
hair.
that's true.
Not
That's true.
just kidding. Both of us,
And of course,
we
the
look
hair
like
test.
we look like brothers from another mother. But go
Yeah,
ahead.
that's exactly right. But it was fascinating. So around 1968, 69, 70, I was starting to really, at that point, 8 years old, I was really starting to act out. I was having a difficult time concentrating. And we discovered that I was definitely lead poisoning. And I was starting to become more open to it. At the same time, I learned about the importance and the significance of how diet affects you. And my dad's original work in carbohydrates went all the way back to the 1950s. My dad developed a individualized program based on your balance point of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. And I learned very early on that I was very carbohydrate sensitive. I couldn't drink soft drinks like the other kids. I would get headaches. I would act out. I couldn't think straight. So I was very fortunate to understand the relationship of how food impacts all this and how nutrients and the right molecules, orthomolecular, the right molecules can make a huge difference. I was truly saved in those early days just with vitamin C. And so it had a profound impact on my life. And as I got older, I became much more respectful of the understanding, the relationship. In your opening, you were talking about, orthomolecular versus toximolecular. And of course, you mentioned orthomolecular, that word, and it's astonishing. I mean, here it is, 55 years later, and that word is not as well known as it really should be. And it's terrible because it gets lumped in there with the concept of alternative. What could be more alternative than taking these poison molecules, toximolecular molecules that are not normally found in the human body and that can kill you, and consider that to be standard of care? I mean, if anything, that should be considered the last ditch. That's the alternative.
Mhm.
Whereas putting nutrition first and the science of molecular nutrition is so powerful. Orthomolecular relates to those items that are normally found in the human body that control and regulate all of this, life
Yeah.
itself.
Just hold on, Greg. The thing is, we need to establish here is that the reason that this is such a profound science and has such an impact on the health of the human being, especially here in America, is because we have stripped away the nutrients from our food supply in the way we farm. The second thing is we have ultra processed the foods, taken away a lot of the nutrients, and we have really developed so many of these foods that are loaded with preservatives and colorings and all kinds of toxic elements in them that are overburdening our entire digestive system, the liver, the lymphatic system, the immune system. And so we end up with chronic diseases. Then we end up being able to get benefit to heal these things with orthomolecular nutrition. Is that right?
Absolutely. And at the same time, there's also one other piece of the puzzle. I mean, we are all eating to satisfy these individual biochemical needs. Each of us is different based on two factors: lifestyle and genetics. And so some people have some extra hurdles. I like to look at it as extra hurdles that they've got to go over, which are compounded by the fact that, yes, if you're eating a poor diet, if you're eating these ultra processed foods, if you're getting an abundance of these chemical agents that normally you wouldn't get, if you're cooking with certain oils and getting these peculiar long chain fatty acids that are not normally found in humans, all these things compound on themselves. There are some people, you talk about genetics. There are some people you hear about. Everybody knows about that one guy, that uncle, who was 95 years old. He ate whatever he wanted, would drink as much as he wanted, smoked a pack of cigarettes every day. And at 95 years old, he's still going strong. Everything is working really well. It doesn't seem like he has those hurdles. But then you find some people who have
Well,
some
hold on.
encumbrances.
When you say going strong, okay, when I see these people that are 90 or 95, or even some people are 100, when they're barely getting along, having to have assistance, or even
Oh,
just walking, so without a lot of strength. I don't want to be that way
no, I
at 90
understand
or
completely
95.
what you're saying.
I
I'm talking,
want to be like Paul Braggs, or
yeah,
Jack LaLanne. Paul
yeah, yeah,
Braggs at 95 died on a surfboard accident.
yeah, yeah.
Jack LaLanne was going to the gym, working out. In his 90s, he was working out in 90. He was 95, working out in a gym. This is the kind of vitality and health that we're talking about. Just because somebody lives to 95
No, no,
doesn't.
I don't mean to say just a living long. You want to be with vim and vigor, and you
Yeah,
want to be able to really live your life.
yeah,
So no,
absolutely.
I'm with you on that, brother.
Yeah. So, anyways, go ahead, continue on with
Well, so,
what you.
over the years, so my father really did develop the whole orthomolecular paradigm and actually defined it. He created the Orthomolecular Medical Society, and then it went on to create the Society for Orthomolecular Health Medicine. He and Abe Hoffer worked together. My dad was the first president because they wanted to bring doctors into this. It was absolutely incredible that there was such angst about the term orthomolecular. And there was this wrestling match between a number of the conventional docs who wanted to be involved, but for some reason they were very threatened by the term orthomolecular. It's really kind of crazy. My dad was the first president of the Abram Hoffer's group up in Canada, the International Society of Orthomolecular Medicine, which puts out the Journal of Orthomolecular Medicine. And they were really trying to establish a scientific group to show the entire medical community how powerful this medicine is. And even with that, I hate to get involved in conspiracies, but at every turn, they were being hit. I mean, to give you an idea, 1972, and this is the way they operate even still to this day. They flood you with legal problems. In 1972, my dad basically was expressing to the whole world about what orthomolecular was, and he was featured as the cover story in Prevention magazine. And he was saying things like food is good, fluoride is bad, nutrient therapy for deficiencies is a very powerful tool. And within 3 or 4 days of that article hitting the newsstands, my dad was brought up on something like 63 charges from the medical society and the hospital where he had privileges. This is one of the reasons why my dad didn't work with hospitals. He stayed away from hospitals and he preferred to have a private practice. And that's how he most of his entire medical career was spent working out of our house. But it's frustrating because here it is, 60 years later, and we are still having the same debate. And I'm very hopeful. For the first time, we've got people in Washington who are starting to say, "Hey, maybe there's something to this.
Hold
Maybe
on, hold
poison."
on, hold on. Time out there. I'm going
Yeah.
to put my hat on here.
All
Finally,
right.
make America healthy again.
Yes,
Yeah,
healthy
I'm
and
really,
happy.
I'm excited that we've got somebody like Robert Kennedy, who is just coming on board, but he still is being, they're just really trying to come against him with great forces, talking about powerful forces. They don't want him getting in there because the drug companies are right now running scared because there's so much corruption. They have a stranglehold on the medical profession. They manipulate all day long in the medical schools.
Talk about censor. They have been censoring people, medical professionals. There is so much information that's out there. There is by far more information about the biochemical pathways of the human body than all the drugs that have been researched combined. And it is absolutely horrifying. We're living in this crazy world, especially, coming at it from the supplement side. Here we are in a situation where we're controlled by this law called DSHEA, a 1994 law, which is what supplements come under. And the way the system works, basically the drug companies, they want to own disease. And we're stuck in a position where we can really only make what are called so-called structure function claims. And God forbid they want to go after you, because they can anything you say they can use against you, and they can misrepresent. And I think it's very important that we have the ability. Science does not grow by censoring people and preventing the sharing of ideas. And we have literally been in a standstill for the last 50 years, doctors in particular, because there is a group of medical boards. If you have an MD in particular, if you're an MD in America, you are really tightly controlled. And if you do anything that's outside of the standard of care, it can be interpreted as criminal, especially if you accept Medicare. A lot of people don't realize this. And so a lot of doctors who are practicing preventive medicine, orthomolecular nutrition, whatever you want to call it, they're really gambling, and they're putting themselves out and risking themselves for their patients. And as a country, it's pretty obvious we're going broke, especially when it comes to healthcare, and we're not getting anything for the money. I mean,
consider that we have 70% of Americans that are overweight. At least 50% of the population has one chronic disease, or actually 60%, and two people.
It's the numbers.
60.
The numbers are incredible.
50% have two chronic diseases, and this is getting worse. It's not getting better. If we had a healthcare system, it would be getting better. And when we have people who begin to take an active role in their healthcare, and they get under the care of orthomolecular doctors, preventative medicine doctors, functional medicine doctors, whatever you want to call it, they start to be able to reclaim their health. And this is really sad that more and more people don't know this truth, and truth is being suppressed. That's what's happening.
Well, the irony of this is that there's no incentive. A doctor who goes into this field, they're like everybody else. They want to pay their mortgage, and they want to send their kids to school and live a life. And it's very frustrating because the pace is the way the system works right now. There's not much of an incentive for a doctor to go into this arena. And this is the problem. People expect healthcare; they want it as a right. But the way the system, it's all you're being gamed. The system is working against you. What they say they'll pay for, and what's considered outside the mainstream.
Yeah, and insurance companies will not pay for preventative medicine. They won't pay for functional medicine, orthomolecular medicine, because they say it's not proven. Well, again, the powers that be are trying to suppress the information because there's so much research out there right now to prove that nutrition, vitamins, lifestyle can heal and restore the body, but it's being suppressed, and the insurance companies are being manipulated again by the powers that be.
Well, I've always made a joke about it, but my dad used to say that the MD is really a medical delusion. Doctors are an unusual group. When they come out of medical school, they've given a great deal of their life to the system, and they just want to have their practice and do their business. But the problem is they're not trained. And because of this lack of incentive, the medical schools and the connection with drug companies in particular, they're not pushed into this. So my dad would look at it. There are two delusions, actually. The medical delusion is based on two things. Number one, vitamins don't work. Okay. Number two, drugs do. And
Yeah.
that's medicine in a nutshell. So I always tell people, if you're well enough to walk into a hospital, don't. And if you find yourself in a hospital, you want to get out as quickly as possible.
Yes,
It's particularly terrible what's happened in the last 20 years, because I've seen it not only as a guy who owns a vitamin company, but also somebody who's worked with patients in my dad's practice and working, seeing what you got to go through. And about 25 years ago, the handwriting was on the wall. They wanted to get rid of all private practice physicians. And it's very important. I think we're at a crossroads right now with what's going on in DC, the whole movement of Make America Healthy Again, what's going on with RFK. We have an opportunity, and it's very important for the audience to understand this, because this is not some new battle. This is a battle that's been going on now for really more than 60 years. Certainly, you want to go back to when a lot of the medical schools went out of business, and the Flexner report and all that. But right now, we have a big battle, and it's important that we come together. In my other role, I'm the vice chairman of the National Health Federation, which is just about to celebrate our 70th anniversary. We're having an event in Texas in March, and Peter McCullough will be there, and Sayer G will be there. We got a bunch of people that are going to be very interesting who will be there. I will, of course, be there and sharing more about methylation and whatnot. But this organization has been fighting for people for 70 years. And the reality is, the war is still going on. These forces are unbelievable, what we are up against. And so I encourage everybody who's out there, find your voice, look into a group like the National Health Federation, and join us, because it's an uphill battle, and it's been an uphill battle for a very long time, especially for medical doctors.
Okay, so because of time constraints here,
You bet.
Greg, I want to shift our conversation right now.
Sure.
And I want to get into talking about looking at how do we determine nutritional deficiencies. I know that in my practice that I do that routinely, and I've been doing it since 1986. But I want to hear from your perspective of the testing methods that your father used, and that
You bet.
He really wanted to get information to these other doctors so that they could see the value of these tests, to find out these nutritional deficiencies, to find out the toxicity inside the body from like toxic metals and other things that will cause disruption, like the disruption in the gut microbiome, dysbiosis in the gut, where the imbalance of good and bad bacteria, all these things interplay with the nutritional stats.
if I could summarize, in simple terms for the audience, my father created a system based on three major areas of analysis: nutrition, pollution, and stress. Now, the first two are pretty easy to understand. It's the equivalent of checking the oil of your car. You check the oil of your car. Do you have dirty oil? Okay, well, that'll tell you something. Start with how malnourished are you? People will tell me, I don't need vitamins. And I've always asked them, well, when was the last time you checked? Everybody who's always said that to me, I've always asked this question, and 100%, they've all told me, well, I've never checked my blood levels. This concept that the average American diet is adequate in nutrients, my dad called that the nutritional death sentence. in
Yeah.
his book
No,
Mega
no,
Nutrition.
Greg,
So
let's just
so
be
so
fair. The medical community in a standard blood test will do a very cursory
oh yeah,
evaluation of nutrients. Like they'll do some minerals, like potassium and
right,
sodium and maybe
right,
magnesium,
electrolytes.
calcium, and then they'll look at maybe B12, but then it pretty much stops there.
Yeah, we get into anemia, and unless you're actually presenting with the vitamin deficiency diseases, that's the only way they see deficiencies: beriberi and rickets and uh, scurvy. But and I'm not against a CBC. I think it has its place, but a CBC does not tell the whole story. So start off with a micronutrient test. This is something that your doctor probably isn't doing for you if you're going into a conventional medical practice. So we work with companies like SpectraCell and would get a micronutrient test. And what's nice about
By the
this is
way,
that,
by the way, I've been using SpectraCell since the late 80s.
yeah, yeah. Well, what's nice about it is that, once you do this, you can point to something. It's pretty hard to argue. Hey, you got a problem here. And of course, a lot of doctors miss out on the fact that there's subclinical deficiencies where, it looks like it's okay, but you're falling a little short. And what a lot of people don't realize is that laboratory analysis is based on averages from those laboratories. So just because we're showing, you know, uh, for lack of a better example, vitamin B12 might be normal at 400 here. Well, other parts of the world, it's considerably higher. So again, this is missed out on by a lot of doctors, and patients are saying, "Hey, I don't feel good." So first thing we want to do is let's just get a perspective. What are your nutrient levels? What's going on with your nutrient levels? Do you have deficiency? How malnourished are you? Then you get into pollution. So, like I was saying earlier, my dad started the hair tests in 1968, which is a great measurement because the hair is a record. It keeps it there. So you're looking for things like lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic. We were even testing fluoride in our practice, and we had patients who were being poisoned by excess fluoride. Look at what's going on, for example, with people who we have an epidemic of kidney disease. Well, hate to tell you, folks, you start having renal failure, renal problems. Your body can't process that fluoride. The fluoride will kill your kidneys. And of course, drugs are loaded. Half the drugs that are primarily prescribed in the United States are loaded with fluorides and bromides. So there's a lot of poison out there.
Yeah. The thing about looking at toxic metals, the medical community will look at a blood test, which is not a stable tissue. It only hangs around for around 90 days.
Exactly.
And
Short
so
term.
hair is a stable tissue. It's been around for a long time. And so, yeah, you really want to be able to use something like that so you get a measurement of what's been going on for a lot of years.
Well, certainly, if you have a positive hair test, you follow it up with blood just to make sure, are you currently being tested? Are you currently being poisoned right now? Because
Mm-hmm.
you can be fooled. You can get a blood test 9 months, a year later, and you don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, so there's a tool for that.
Mm-hmm.
The real big leap I think that my dad arrived at was in the early 80s. And when we talk stress, we're talking, hormone stress, hormone balance, blood coagulation, blood clotting, thick blood syndrome, and then methylation and genomics. And that really became the central theme of my dad's workup. Let's face it. I mean, how do most people die? Vascular disease is common. Cancer is common. Stroke is common. So my dad had an epiphany, and one day he realized, well, what is nutrition? Nutrition is circulation. Circulation is nutrition. If you block your circulation, by default, you become malnourished. You are blocking nutrient delivery to the cells. Uh, about two-thirds of the population suffers from low blood flow syndrome, this hypercoagulation effect. In particular, one of the biggies is homocysteine. To make a long story short, you take all of our patients, you put them on a spreadsheet. Those with the most clotting at the top of the list, those with normal blood viscosity at the bottom, everyone at the top of the list has something in common. They are all disabled. chronic inflammation, chronic illness. These people get sick and stay sick, premature aging, and sadly, if they're not aware of this, premature death. So that really changed my dad's practice, because he started seeing so many people who had excessive clotting. And when I talk clotting, I'm not saying you're having an occlusion and you're having a heart attack or a stroke. No. This is just low blood flow. You just have to lower the blood flow a little bit, and it disrupts oxygen to the brain, nutrients to the cells. When those cells want a nutrient, you've got a short amount of window there to get it to that cell. If you don't get it to the cell activity stops and the cell collapses. Again, inflammatory, hard to heal when you got that vicious circle going on.
Mhm.
I mean, to give you an example, how powerful this can be. We had a guy came to see us in his mid 40s, healthy guy, appearing to be healthy, athletic. Within 6 months, he was disabled, could not walk. Did a family history on him. Every male in his family dead, usually in their 50s, before 60. Checked him out. Clotting factors, homocysteine, fibrinogen, lipoprotein A, factor 2, factor 5, small dense LDL. His homocysteine, fibrinogen, and LPA were off the charts. You took this guy's blood and you turned around for a minute, it congealed in the tube almost immediately.
Mm.
He was scheduled for a hip replacement. When they got into it, he had such necrosis of the hip, where he had improper blood flow to the hip. His hip was becoming gelatinous. So we started treating him. I'm happy to say it's about 25 years later, the guy's alive and currently about 70 now.
Nice.
And so, and this is something that's not on people's radar.
So you mentioned the homocysteine, the LP little a. These are tests that I've been doing since the 90s, when SpectraCell,
Yes.
they began there, I think in about 1993. And I've been doing that test on my patients ever since 1993, and getting us to see many people who have elevated levels of homocysteine. Let's talk about what happens when you have elevated levels of homocysteine.
Well, homocysteine is getting some notoriety these days, especially from the whole methylation MTHFR situation. Homocysteine, like everything else, it's not all bad. Homocysteine is a potential. It's a an intermediate byproduct, and it potentially could be harmful if it's in excess. Those patients who show excess homocysteine have a multiplier effect risk factor for vascular disease and heart disease,
as well as kidney disease.
There are everything: diabetes, vision issues, depression. About 95% or more of our patients with depression come from vascular risk family histories, and you run their blood, and it's very clear. And then, of course, they go down the line into the methylation category. We have, again, more encumbrances and interferences with your natural chemistry. Your body has to work harder than somebody who doesn't have that interference. So homocysteine is something that's kind of hard to avoid, because there's an amino acid that the body must get, which you typically get from animal protein, called methionine. You don't get methionine, you die. In the plant world, it can be difficult. You have to eat, the cruciferous vegetables, the sulfur vegetables, broccoli and Brussels sprouts and cabbage and cauliflower. Unfortunately, there are other issues for some vegans where they've got some GI problems, and sometimes they get gassy, and so they stay away from sulfur vegetables. And so this can be very dangerous if you're not methylating well, and if you're not using B12 and folate very well. Homocysteine can be very, very dangerous. In the initial studies, the original studies that were done by Chambers and McGregor, they gave their subjects the equivalent of methionine, the same methionine load you'd get if you ate 2 steaks. Now, obviously, most people are not eating 2 steaks in one setting. What was interesting is what they found out. 4 hours later, they had them come back. They checked their blood through Doppler effect, and they found that the average healthy male in the group had a reduction of blood flow of 86%. So it's important to understand this clotting activity, it's a roller coaster. A lot of people don't know that they're on it, but they start getting a little older. They start getting fatigued. They don't perform the way they do. They get depressed. They don't feel like themselves. And so this is a very common problem. And like I say, homocysteine is hard to avoid in so much as it's the central theme of the methionine cycle. Again, you don't get overwhelmed by the diagram, but if you look there, you'll see homocysteine and methionine are in this balance. That's the central theme, the central hub of the methylation cycle. And so that's what really opened the door, the Pandora's box, so to speak, for my dad going into this. Once he got into the homocysteine and once he recognized that it was commonplace, these things are exacerbated by heavy metals and toxins. And the reality is we live in a toxic world. You know, as much as we want to pretend that it's not, even by we took the lead out of the gas, we have a lot of toxins around us. I mean, formaldehydes in the carpets, we've got dioxins around us. I mean, everywhere you turn. And of course, these things are all exacerbated by the fact that the food is also is poisonous too, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are getting information about, the problem with methylation and, genetic defects that they might have. They're getting genetic testing. Talk a little bit about how some of that is really misleading people. And,
Well, yeah, this is very important because the one gene, I get calls on this all the time. The reality is that, first of all, as human beings, it's common that we're mutated. Okay, we are all mutants in one way or another. And the genetic testing that's being done that people are running right now is very, very limited because the gene, having this mutation or that mutation does not tell you the whole story. And that's why when you look at our methylation map, you'll see, it's nice to know that you have an MTHFR mutation, whether you're heterozygous or homozygous. But the question really is, how are you adapting to that mutation? Many people are MTHFR mutated, including myself. I know many homozygous who got double hits and they're healthy, doing very well. So the mutation in and of itself does not mean that you are deficient. A lot of people are going out there and they're hearing about methylation and they're rushing to take methylfolate and they're rushing to take methyl B12 and they're unfortunately interfering with one very important word, and that is balance. Methylation is all about balance. And by throwing these large volume doses, mega doses of methylfolate and methyl B12 into the system can have very dreadful effects. And so there's a lot of confusion about that. A lot of people don't understand the differences between the different forms of vitamin B12 in particular. So for us, yeah, we were one of the first groups. The genetic epidemic was a term that my dad coined in '99, and we have been, we've run genetic testing on people, and it's nice to know. But really, what you want to do is you want to identify all the key factors. What's going on with your homocysteine? What's going on with your methionine? Just because you have this MTHFR does not mean that you're in trouble.
copper levels, and other nutrient micronutrients.
Absolutely. I mean, it's and people sometimes they're inducing copper deficiency because they're taking huge doses of vitamin C, which is a metal chelator. It'll pull lead out of you. It'll pull copper out of you. In fact, this was some of the original work that was done at the Linus Pauling Institute where they showed the vitamin C worked better. In fact, when I released Olaloa and our first product, I was the first effervescent vitamin company to put copper as trace copper in the product to deal with that effect. But we want to actually know the byproducts. We're checking for creatine, carnitine, CoQ10. We're checking your glutathione level. We're checking your sarcosine. We're checking all of your B vitamins. That will tell you much, much more than just finding out, oh, I'm MTHFR mutated. I mean, let's face it. Methylfolate, there are issues with methylfolate, in excess as well. And if in terms of methylfolate, if methylfolate were the end all be all, no vegan would ever get sick in so much as they're eating methylfolate constantly. So there's more to it. There's more to it than that.
Sure.
I
Well,
mean,
Greg,
and
well, how important, you mentioned about excess vitamin C, but how important is vitamin C itself in methylation?
well, again, all the vitamins indirectly play a role. I mean, certainly when you're hearing methylation, most people are talking about, methyl B12 or
B6, folic
the
acid.
cobalamin pathway. And that's really an important part of this, which we should discuss, because a lot of people don't understand how that whole system works. Methyl and adenosyl cobalamin are the active forms of vitamin B12, but they are designed to be made intracellularly. The form of vitamin B12 that preferentially enters the cell is hydroxycobalamin. It's stable. And it is the form of B12 that's able to accept the methyl group from methylfolate to make methyl B12 on demand. And this is where people do have some problems, and you can get into the whole methylfolate trap, especially. And again, I'm not going to get too involved in the chemistry of this because it's a little overwhelming. But in essence, if you're suffering from a methylfolate trap where you're not using that methylfolate, when you dump a bunch of methylfolate into it, it creates a log jam at what's called GNMT. And you wind up causing major disturbances. And for those people in particular who have tried to address their homocysteine issues, who have been unsuccessful through B12, B6, and folate, these people in particular oftentimes are truly saved when they get a product like what we have with Olaloa that provides trimethylglycine. It's important to know that trimethylglycine will lower homocysteine even when B12 and folate fail. And it only requires one enzyme. Whereas with vitamin B12
You need three.
and folate, it requires a minimum of 3. And if you get into the folate pathway, it's another 13. So, I mean, there's a lot of luck when it comes to using B12 and folate, an
Sure.
ideal diet, and a lot of luck from start to finish in the digestive system. Your body produces BHMT. And in fact, if you go on a fast, your body produces more betaine homocysteine methyltransferase. This is a very specific enzyme that works specifically with betaine.
Yeah,
The problem is getting
we better tone down the biochemistry a little bit.
yeah. The trick to get betaine, you got to eat a lot of beets. Whereas I've got about the equivalent of 3 pounds of beets in here. So to do that, this is why I say micronutrients have a place.
Now,
And
you're talking when you're saying in here. Let's define what here is. You have a multivitamin that's in a powdered form that you mix with water, and it tastes delicious, and it's got all these cofactors, all the vitamins, all the things that are necessary for the methylation pathway to be completed. Let's talk about that.
well, it's interesting. Part of this was out of my own desire. I started developing this line of products with my dad in our medical practice, and we were going to do capsules. And then I started to realize that to do it, you'd have to take a lot of capsules. And the more I would talk to our patients, the more I realized, and most of the patients that came to see my dad in our practice were serious medically ill patients who were dealing with either vascular disease or cancer. And they were in real trouble. And even to save their own lives, there were days they said, I can't take another pill. My son was just, a few years old, and I realized I need to have something that I could share with him. And I realized, why not make it a more pleasurable experience? The neat thing about effervescence is that you're basically making a colloid mixture, a soup. And when you mix
Well, yeah, we
vitamin
said
C,
this for our listening audience. When you make a colloid, it makes very, very tiny particles that get absorbed into the body.
yes, and it's easy on the system.
Yes.
So you start off with one form of vitamin C and you wind up with buffered vitamin C, a multitude of vitamin Cs. So you get mineral complexing and mineral ascorbates. It works much better. So That's what led, and of course, at the time, all this work in methylation was becoming the focal point of our work. And so I distilled my dad's genius into this product. And we have a few different products.
Okay, now wait, before we move on to the other products,
Sure.
we're looking at when you first developed this, what year was that?
Started to develop the product in around 1996, 97.
Okay, now just stop and think about for a minute. Methylation and its interest in it has only become popular now. For how long now?
Well, within the past, short little period here. Yeah.
Yeah, little short, just
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah.
And you guys developed these products back in the late or the mid 90s.
Yeah.
So I think you have a little bit of experience, a little bit more experience, and your dad being the pioneer in this whole field. How much should people be trusting these products? In my estimation, if somebody has a problem with the methylation process, the pathway in their body, they need to be looking at your products called Loa multivitamins.
Yes. And it makes a world of difference.
And even if somebody doesn't have a problem with methylation, they can take these products to help to prevent any kind of cardiovascular problems, could prevent other kinds of problems that may be mildly deficient inside the body. This will help to maximize and optimize the
we get used for a lot of different reasons. I mean, certainly people who are looking for energy is our foundation product. It's our multivitamin product, and it's providing 36 vitamins, minerals, amino acids, digestives, electrolytes, and osmolytes. So in terms of hydration effect, the osmolytes are actually more powerful than electrolytes alone. You'll go into electrolyte stress very, very quickly. Sodium flees the cell very quickly, and it throws off the balance in the cell, what's called the osmotic pressure of the cell. Osmolytes maintain this cell, and so your cell life is extended. You don't go through your hydration as quickly, so it has a profound impact. And so all of our products provide osmolytic support. And of course, it's frustrating because I'm seeing all these electrolyte products that are popping up these days that are 3-4 ingredient products, but they're missing all the antioxidant support. They're missing.
How do your products support eliminating toxic metals out of the body?
Oh, well, there's a whole variety of pathways. I mean, let's just start with vitamin C. Vitamin C, if you had nothing else, will start to pull these metals out. Ultimately, there's your master antioxidant and your master detoxifier in the body is what's called glutathione, which, again, if you go to our website, you can read the little booklet on the healing power of methylation. And what's exciting about that is that you go through the methylation transsulfuration pathway, and it leads you to glutathione. If you don't make glutathione, you are a sitting duck for chemical sensitivity. And there are a lot of people who just don't feel like themselves. They're toxic. Just people who are doing drugs.
People need to know that glutathione is the major antioxidant that our body produces on its own. But
yes,
many people are not getting the right nutrition, so they're deficient, and the body's not making it like it should to optimal levels.
That's why you want to make sure the greatest risk typically with vitamins is not getting enough. And so, it's important to have a substantial a product like Olaloa, which makes it so easy. It fills in the gaps. I mean, there are a lot of people who just don't eat very well. We've dealt with people who are, older people who their caloric intake goes down. They can't get anywhere near the nutrient necessary to sustain themselves. And so they go, if you've ever spent any time in a senior facility, if you see some of the food that these people are eating, it's a slow death of malnutrition.
Sure. But even if somebody is eating well, and we're living in a toxic world, so how does this product, your multivitamins, help to eliminate toxins? You mentioned the vitamin C in there. There's about 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C.
All of the elements that are needed to get through to that end product stage is what you're going to get when you're taking Olaloa. And this is where a lot of people get hung up because it's not uncommon for people to be deficient in a half a dozen nutrients.
Mhm.
So they can never catch up. And again, I can't stress this enough. If you cannot deliver nutrients to the cell, and if you've got low blood flow due to hypercoagulation, you're at risk for everything. You can never get ahead of it. It's a vicious, vicious circle. And I get, the other thing we should probably mention here when it comes to methylation is to understand why it's so, it encompasses everything. And the essential thing to understand here is that this is the adaptive mechanism of the human body, which leads to the production of about 500 critical products. In our little booklet here, I talk about the top 20, but you're talking about heart function, circulation, digestion, detoxification, immunity, uh, brain health, and energy regulation of every cell of your body. Creatine, carnitine, CoQ10, calmodulin, SAMe, all made through this process. If you
And again,
interfere,
Greg, your multivitamin is going to maximize the ability for the body to produce the proper amounts of all the methylation pathways. Correct?
yes, and that's the key. And of course, I hope along the way, part of what I'm trying to get across to people is not only the chemistry side of it, but also a way of life, a lifestyle. How do we eat? Becoming more in tune with what you're putting into your body, avoiding the poisons.
Okay, Greg, I
Yeah.
apologize, but we just had a little bit of a blip in our transmission here on the computer. So your last 30 seconds was disrupted. So let's repeat that, please.
What I was saying is that when it comes to Olaloa, it's not just about the biochemistry, but it's really a lifestyle and embracing and understanding to be an advocate for yourself and to understand when it comes to not only getting the proper nutrients and having a support product like Olaloa, but it's also respecting what you put in your mouth.
Yeah.
Understanding and awareness of, food. It's also about what my father used to call the inner smile, in a sense of, you got to start every day understanding that, every day is the greatest day of your life, and it puts you into a certain mental state where you're not taking in all this negative energy. There's, we have so much negativity that we're facing these days.
Yeah, no question about it. Greg, here's the thing. Here on the other side of medicine, I am always, proposing to people that food is your best medicine. We always start there.
But
that's what you're talking about right now. You're also talking about lifestyle and mindset. All these things interplay in the body's ability to heal itself and to maintain good health. But because of the fact that we're living in a toxic world, we're living in a world full with stress, and everybody goes through these daily cycles and stress every single day, that the Olaloa products will give an extra edge and help the body to be able to protect itself and give us some more insurance, I guess you would say. So I think that's important to understand. But Greg, we're going to have to kind of end this because we're coming to a close on this. What would you like to leave our listening audience with tonight?
Well, certainly, I hope it's a message of hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
The fact is, we distilled down in our product line here at Olaloa. We distilled down about 50 years of medical research, and I tried to do it in a very thoughtful, respectful way with a true strategy. Multivitamins, for the most part, when people hear multivitamins, they haven't changed much in the last 50 years. I think we revolutionized this category and have made it easy for people to drink your vitamins.
Sure. Yeah. And the other thing is, people need to realize that most vitamin companies are owned by drug companies, a big business. I mean, that's their concern is not about getting the best quality products to you. They're concerned about making the greatest profit. Whereas a company like yours is all about getting the optimal nutrition, the best delivery of them, and the most balanced nutrients combinations. And I think that's important to understand. No, so Greg, I really want to thank you. And I just want to let our listening audience know, if you really enjoyed this program today, we're here every single week here on the other side of medicine. And in conjunction with that, I have a community that's called School, SKOOL. And in my community that you can get into for free, you'll get access to not only all my podcasts, but you'll get access to free courses like the Supernatural Morning, which gives you a routine for every single day to be able to have the best day of your life by starting your mornings off on the right foot. We have right now going on a free poop challenge, a 7-day poop challenge, where we assess your poop by looking at and having you observe your poop, and we give you a manual to be able to evaluate the story that your poop is telling you. If your poop could talk to you, what would it tell you? And our manual tells you exactly what's going on. And then we give you lifestyle modifications during that 7 days to be able to optimize your bowel function and be able to help to get your immune system stronger, because 70% of your immune system is inside your gut. And the other thing is, we have multiple courses. I have a course called The 7 Causes of Illness. I've got free books there. I've got a question and answer period 1 time per week that you can have me answer questions for you about your health concerns. There's a community of like-minded people there where you can interact with those people and become friends with them and support each other. So go to my school community by going to skool.com, skool.com, and then in the search bar, put in gut, GUT 911 RX. So that's 3 words in the search bar. Gut, GUT. The second word is 911. The third word is just RX, gut 911 prescription. So, Greg, I want to thank you for being our guest tonight. I am just so grateful for all the work your dad did and what you're continuing on, his legacy. So thank you so much. And we're going to have you back, Greg, because you've got so much to offer.
It was great to be with you.
Okay, everyone. Until next time, I'm Dr. Christosic. People call me Dr. J. And ciao for now.
Are we still live?